Welcome home to USA Global TV and Radio, a place where dreams take flight, with authentic storytelling, diverse perspectives and meaningful conversations, where global stories unite and bridges are built beyond all borders. Discover world-class education, entertainment, hope and inspiration. Together, we're building bridges worldwide. Subscribe to our channel, USA Global TV. Download our app, USA Global TV. Be our guest or join our team. Visit usaglobaltv.com. Thanks to our founder and executive producer, Dr. Jacalyn KERBECK. Music score by Yeffy Tang from Cloud Road Music. Voiceover artist Mike Porter. Creative direction by Paul Garcia. USA Global TV and Radio, your home for global connection. All rights reserved. This video and its contents are the exclusive property of USA Global TV and Radio. Unauthorized use, duplication or redistribution in any form is strictly prohibited.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome home to USA Global TV and Radio, where we proudly provide world-class education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. I'm Dr. Jacalyn KERBECK, and our show today is The Wise Ones. And if you're wondering where is Red, that is the question of the day. Red is on holiday, so I am filling in for him. If you're not familiar with me, I'm actually the president and creator of USA Global TV and Radio, where we proudly host over 60 different television shows in 3 different languages. So thank you for joining us today. Today's episode on The Wise Ones, we are excited to welcome back a repeat guest who is here on the corner bookstore. His name is Trevor Harrison, and he is not only an author and a world traveler, but he is a professor of political sociology. What is it? I don't know. We're going to find out. Let's welcome Trevor to the program. Hello, hello.
Hello. Good morning, Jacalyn.
Hi, it's good to see you. Thanks for coming back. We love when people come back to see us. And thank you also to Mickey Mickelson of Creative Edge, because he is a dear partner and friend. And thank you for having the courage to come back and be with me today. I appreciate it.
It didn't take a lot of courage. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation with Red last time. So, to come back again is just makes my day for sure.
Well, thank you so much for that. So as I opened up the show today, talking about you being a professor, can you tell us exactly where your expertise level is? Because sometimes people think of sociology, they think of politics, but when you put them together, what is it that you get?
Yeah, I guess I'm a fairly eclectic scholar. I actually, here in Canada, belong to the Political Science Association, the Sociology Association. I actually belong to the American Sociology Association for some time as well. My work is pretty interdisciplinary, and students got quite used to the fact that I was going to throw in politics, economics, history, and a number of other things. And the reason for that is basically, as a sociologist, I don't like to hive off certain parts of thinking about things, and so I try to put all the parts back together again. So in even talking about, say, cultural things or literature or art, I think is important to understanding society as a whole. So that's kind of been always my approach, a very interdisciplinary kind of thing.
Fantastic. Well, you're a perfect fit for our show, The Wise Ones. Can you tell us, before you retired from being a professor, which obviously you'll always be a professor, but before that you were doing this on an everyday basis, how have you seen academia change over the course of your career?
Yeah, there's the obvious kind of just structural things at universities and colleges where the sheer number of people coming sometimes outweighs the number of people who are teaching there. And that's unfortunate. I can remember a time where classes could be 30, 35 students. And of course, as you went up into higher levels, you'd have really good ratios of 5 or 6 or 7 to the whoever was teaching. So that's one big thing, and that's just simple kind of economics. The other big thing, of course, right now recently is the introduction of AI technologies, and I've been following that quite a bit and actually talking with colleagues, and I know a number of people are really quite concerned, is how can AI be used in a kind of positive way to enhance learning and knowledge, and on the other hand, what are sort of the detriments of that? So that's a real issue, I think, and we are just entering into that conversation right now.
Agreed. I know for myself, I'm a lifelong learner like you, and I'm currently in the Wharton School of Business program for Chief Strategy Officer, and there's a big section coming up about AI. So I'm really looking forward to that. So I think the more we know, the more we can actually confront our fears and see what's valid. Of course, everything keeps changing, right? So, but
Yeah.
yeah. Go ahead.
Exactly. One of the things I've said about AI is I think on the one hand, we're catastrophizing a little bit more than we should. But on the other hand, I think it's also being overhyped a lot. And so it's kind of being held out there as the latest, greatest thing. And so somewhere between those two poles is probably where we're going to land.
Yeah, I think most things in life are like that, somewhere in the middle. We have our extremes. So you've had an illustrious career as a professor, and you are also a world traveler, and you're also an author. So let's get into the traveling piece. When you were here on the corner bookstore, you and Red had a lot of things in common about places that you have been. So what's coming up for you? And then we'll look at where you've already been. What are some trips that you're planning that you'd like to share with our audience?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and I'm really excited about this one. Well, I actually have a couple of grandkids, and our daughter, who's their mother, was had decided she wanted to go to Paris to take them to Paris Disney. So I thought, okay, this is a chance to hang out with the grandkids. So my wife and I are going to travel over there and be with them for a while in Paris, which I haven't been to for many years actually. And the kids are only just coming up on being 6 and 8, so this will be one of the biggest things they've ever done. But after we finish with the Paris portion of it, we're planning actually a trip to Vienna, meet some friends, and then on to Budapest. And so that portion of through June is going to be really exciting, going to a couple of, well, three fairly major cities. So that's going to be exciting. Come fall, right now, I'm sort of toying with the idea of several different countries, which one to pick. Either Sri Lanka, maybe China, maybe Morocco. Very disparate places. But the last couple of years, I've been to Southeast Asia with my adult son. And so I'm looking forward to doing that as well. And of course, as I go along on all of these trips, I always keep fairly extensive notes on all kinds of things, not exactly a diary, but notes that at some point I think I will be using to write something, whether it's fiction, nonfiction, or whatever.
It's always good to be prepared. And it's interesting because just, I think 2 weeks ago in the Wharton program, we had a case study about Disney Paris. And so that's something that you and I can chat about offline.
Indeed.
Quite interesting. So
Yeah.
last summer, I also went to Paris, and then I went to Vienna, which was terrific. So I'd love to know, with your background as a professor and the areas that you focused in, how do you tap into them when you're making your plans or when you're actually there in country?
Yeah, in this case, like I said, going back to Paris, I'd been there many years ago. I was actually 20, and so it was kind of, I always wanted to go back there. So here's an opportunity. Um, the Vienna case, actually, I went there back in 2007 or so. It was for a conference on demography, in fact. And my wife wasn't able to come along at that time, but I said, you know, that it's just a fabulous country. The art, there's any number of palaces in Vienna. It's wonderful, but it also has such a really interesting history. Vienna, and of course, it was the heart of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which came apart in the First World War. So, as a political sociologist and historian, I'm interested in that. So I said, well, we should go back there. You know, there's much more I never saw when I was there several years ago. So let's do that. So many places to see, and every place has its own story, and sometimes you don't even need to go to the museums, the palaces, things like that. Just walking around the streets, seeing people, taking in the ambience of a place, I think is a really educational thing and quite stimulating. I think for anyone who has a creative bent, travel is just a wonderful thing, as I said to Red.
I agree with you. And I think you and I see the value of going to different cultures and integrating ourselves and learning how people are living. And I know just here in the States, in the US, there are people who are afraid of traveling. And I guess that will always be the case. But I do know for the US that you can go to a government database and you can actually see which countries are safe to travel to and which are not. So you can go with a sense of security. But you had mentioned that you always have your writing tools with you so that in case you were inspired for a story. Has that happened in the past when you were somewhere and then you actually wrote something about it, whether it's a poem or a book?
Yeah, I guess one of the more interesting ones was as a professor, of course, you get opportunities that I actually wish were open to everybody outside of academia too. But I had an exchange to Japan back in 2006, so it's coming up on 20 years. And at that time, it was again, when you're struck by something that is so different from what you know, those differences really jump out at you. So I very intensely began reading everything I could about Japan. I knew some of it, the history, but not everything. You never know everything. And just the culture of the place. So out of that 4 months in Japan, I came back ambitiously and wrote a book that was kind of a blend of different things. It was a bit of political history, and but also I incorporated a number of op-eds I wrote at that time that were published in a newspaper back here in Canada. And I also wrote some haiku poems, which I had never done in my life. So the book came out as this kind of eclectic history, cultural, literary piece. And it was a great deal of fun to write. And that's one book, though, that came directly out of the experience of traveling to a place that was so very different.
That's really fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. And what I'm wondering also is for people who are not aware of what haiku is, could you just explain that briefly?
Yeah, it's actually a 5-line type of poem, and it's actually the meter of it is very structured, and so there's certain syllables for each of the sentences, and so you kind of stick to that. And the thing about haiku is it forces you to concentrate on a singular idea or a singular object in the same way that, for example, if you're a photographer and you're taking a shot you really want, what you want is the viewer to focus on a particular thing in that photo. That's why you're doing it. It's to force people to actually pay attention to something. And so in some sense a haiku poem does the same thing. It could be a visual object, but quite often it's just simply an idea or an emotion or a sense that comes about you, and so you focus on that for that moment.
So it sounds like it's one way to get your thoughts across that's more concise and consolidated. You really have to think about it.
Exactly. It's a very concise way of writing a poem, and there's all styles of poetry, but this is a very concise and measured kind. Yeah.
Speaking of the word measured, and by the way, there's no script, so Trevor has no idea what I'm going to ask, and I don't know what I'm going to ask. But speaking of measured,
I love these kind of conversations. I used to.
You don't know where they're going to go.
I still give public talks. I have one coming up in the next little while here, and I always say to people, what I'm going to say, I know what I'm going to say. I don't find that all that interesting. What I find is actually the to and fro afterwards when people ask me questions, because that keeps my brain somewhat alive, because I have to answer something that is totally off the wall sometimes. So yeah.
That's right. Much more fun than a script.
Oh yeah.
So when you were talking about managing, and I'm just wondering, what topics do you think that scholars are not talking or writing about that they should be?
Oh, that's a first thing comes to mind is the idea that there are parts of the world that we actually that people don't know about or don't think about. So obviously there are dominant countries in the world in the politically, economically, whatever. But there's a whole bunch of really fascinating places out there that just don't get much publicity. And unfortunately, it goes back to what you were saying before about people being afraid of traveling. One of the reasons that sometimes people are afraid to go someplace is simply because they don't know anything about it. And so, I think the more we know about each other and about places, we can actually diminish some of that fear and even hostility. So, for example, places, some parts of Africa or some parts of Asia that are not all that well known. I think one of the things that scholars themselves, and there, I can think of some wonderful scholars who are able to do this, who, as I said before, my idea of academia was to pull things together, to show how disparate parts actually fit together in a whole. And I think a lot of our scholarship over the last 100 years and increasingly has remained kind of compartmentalized. And I don't think we do the public all that well by doing that. So I tend to like scholars who are very broad in their way of trying to put together, say, the economy, politics, material productions, culture. I think that's the kind of thing that actually real academics should be aiming for. And that's not to say that, I will disparage people who are very specific in their scholarship, but I do think that there is always a bigger world outside of whatever it is that we're writing about.
Good point. Thank you. And just to stay on that topic, when we think about traveling and places in the world that people are not that familiar, I know as Americans, and you're Canadian, right? But as Americans, sometimes we go in and we bring light to something and then chaos ensues. So sometimes by bringing something to the public domain, so to speak, it causes chaos in cultures. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think, sometimes it's because we tend to, and it's not just Americans per se, but we go in with a idea of already what we're going to find. And so we kind of overlay what we see with, and that's the part of human nature. We always come in with kind of misconceptions or apprehensions of what's going on. To go in there with a somewhat minimal amount of knowledge, but also the to be humble, to realize you don't know everything, and to go in almost as a child and try to experience a place is probably a safer route. So it's very easy, we have a long history in the Western world of kind of putting our feet down in some place and then saying this place should be just the way we like it back home. And again, I think we don't do anybody good service when we do that. So I think that's part of it. I do think, as I said, that it would be really valuable. The more that people could travel to places, I think we could overcome a lot of the conflicts in the world if people actually realized that even with some differences, we are all still human beings. And our drives, our emotions are in a lot of ways very similar and actually haven't changed over tens of thousands of years.
I agree with you absolutely. I'm also a peace ambassador, and what I find is that we're typically afraid of things that we don't know or understand. And when we
Yeah.
start traveling, we really have a different perspective about the world, and it seems much smaller. But I know for people who've never traveled, and this is just an observation and just a generalization, but what I found is many times people will say they're so this or they this
Yeah.
because they've never been there and they don't know. Well, we're all humans, just like you mentioned,
Yeah.
we're all just people. So when I've traveled over the summer, I went to Greece and I went to London, which was both were terrific. And I realized that I had some questions that I didn't even know were there that I wanted answered. So I'm just
Right.
wondering, with all the traveling that you've done and that you're doing, what are some of the questions that you're still looking for answers for?
Yeah, I'm interested in that kind of connectedness between, on the one hand, we've been globalizing for hundreds of years, and so the word of from the early 80s on is globalization, but we've actually been globalizing in terms of trade, travel, politics, everything for a long time. But I'm really interested in ways that local cultures or societies are able to navigate that without being swamped, right? It's very easy for smaller countries and societies to get kind of swamped by, say, large corporations. I'm really interested in how communities are able to maintain a sense of community in the face of this and navigate their way through so they don't lose the best parts of themselves. And this is actually a really important thing, it seems to me, for people who are interested in travel, is if the whole world becomes homogenized and the same coffee shops are everywhere, and the same everything is everywhere, why would people want to travel anymore? I think people travel because they are interested in those differences. They're interested in seeing how local cultures thrive, how new ideas emerge. And so, somewhere again, balancing, as we've talked about here, between what can be globalized without too much harm, and at the same time, how do we retain a sense of difference, which also is really important, I think, for people's sense of identity.
That's so true. It's like we want to come in and take over. And if we do, everything changes and we all become the same. So I agree with you. I like to travel and see how other people are living. One of the things that really came to light for me when I went to Greece, and I'm not saying this is all of Greece, just the part that I was in, was there was a lot of smoking. And in the United States, like you could be, if you're within so many feet of a building, it's a problem. But not only that, people were very comfortable with their bodies. It wasn't
Yeah.
like in the States where we constantly see you've got to lose weight, you've got to be this size, you got to be that size. It was kind of like, yeah, I'm smoking and I'm whatever size I am, and I'm pretty happy.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought up Greece, because Greece is one of my favorite countries. I first went there when I was 20, and I was the kid kind of going around with my backpack and slept on a beach in Mykonos for over a month. And I fell in love with Greece. I think I was already again in love with Greece before I got there, reading about, ancient Athens and Sparta and whatever. So I've been back many, many times. And actually, I've been now teaching myself Greek over some years. Currently, I'm using Duolingo, but I was using a Rosetta Stone for a while. I love Greece. I've been there multiple times, and your description is quite right. Um, there's still a sense of, and it's not a wealthy country. It is a poor country in Europe, but there's a sense of community and humanity there, despite obvious problems that you don't find in a lot of other places. That the village life, you go out to some village, out to some islands or just inland, and there's a sense of real locality, of community in these places, and of freedom to be who you are. The smoking thing is a really interesting one because, of course, the European Union, when Greece joined, and it was a big decision, they have certain rules. One of them is around health issues and smoking. Well, trying to convince the Greeks to give up their cigarettes is not an easy thing. So it is changing in some parts, but you're absolutely right. You'll see a lot of smoking there that you wouldn't see in North America.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting, not the smoking part, but just how people were so liberated and just happy with their bodies instead of being obsessed about what size they were and what they look like in a bathing suit. So I really did find that refreshing. But I want to
Yeah.
talk a little bit about the fact that you are the recipient of some awards, one that you earned in 2023. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, the university and also the province I live in, Alberta, there's a couple of awards. So I got one award was a speaker's award. It was actually named. It's not because of somebody speaking, although some people say I speak too much. Uh, it's actually named after an individual by the name of Speaker, and it was a research award for over kind of longevity, for having done solid research and writing about it over a long period of time. I then also received a provincial award the next year for, again, within the university and college system in the province, producing a lot of things over a long period of time that were important. And one of the parts of that, though, besides the research, was that it was given out for someone who acts as a public intellectual, someone who doesn't just sit in their office and write things that people don't read, but who has a role of communicating, bringing whatever knowledge you have to the public. And so I have a long record actually of doing that, giving public talks and being available to media. I regularly still get interviewed by radio, television, newspapers about whatever kind of thing they think I have a certain amount of expertise in. So those were two very nice awards to be given towards the end of my career.
Thank you for sharing that, Professor. We're going to go on to your written work, but before we do, I have to ask you, since you said you've been on a number of other platforms, what haven't you been asked that you'd like to discuss?
What haven't I been asked? My writing actually, to go back to the writing and research, has actually been pretty eclectic, as I said before. The one book about Japan, I actually would love to write a book about Greece someday, partly about my own experiences, but about more broadly, sociologically about it. I've also written some really interesting, one of my, one book that keeps coming up that people contact me about all the time is a book I wrote about uh, a musician and an instrument maker. He made guitars and Elizabethan lutes. And he was a fairly obscure person living here in Alberta, but I happen to know him as a child because he used to come to our house. So I ended up writing this quasi-personal biography of this guy who's a very interesting but little known individual. That was a great deal of fun to actually do that. And as I said, I still get people writing me about it and saying, "Hey, I read your book on this guy. I knew him," and that's always kind of fun.
That is definitely fun. And you do have a book that is coming out very soon. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's the main title is Safarnameh, which is actually an Urdu or Farsi word for journey. And it has a subtitle in terms of a traveler's journey. There it is, Reflections on a Journey from Turkey to India in the Last Years of the Hippie Trail. This was a travel I did as a young man before I'd ever been to university. And at that time, I kept actually pretty good notes about it. And so the book is supposed to be coming out this spring through Athabasca University Press. And it's on the one hand kind of a personal memoir. I actually kept very good notes on that trip, but it also is kind of a socio-political historical discussion of the places I was going through. And it's been a lot of years in the making, but I'm really looking forward to actually seeing it in hand. The picture that you actually see there on the cover, this is not just some random hippie. This actually is a picture of me at that time.
I knew that. I was going to say, I bet that's you.
That that is me. Yes, I there was a Swedish woman named Maud who, and I actually the book is dedicated to several people I knew and traveled with at the time. Anyway, she took that picture, and after I got back from overseas, she sent that to me. And when I was thinking about the book, I said, "Yeah, that's got to be on the cover. It's I like it."
It looks terrific. So what would you like the reader to take away from this book?
Yeah, I think they'll. We talk about people coming away with an understanding of other places and cultures. This is historical, and so times change. But I think people reading it will get a better sense of various countries across the Middle East that at a distance people don't know a lot about. So Turkey, Syria, Iran at that time, because I was there just before the revolution in 79. Afghanistan, that I traveled through and spent some time in, and of course, Pakistan and India. So I hope they'll learn something about that. But the other thing that I think readers can take away from it is it's a book that really captures a historical period in Western culture. Uh, as you know, a large number of Americans, Canadians, Europeans, Australians, and New Zealanders made that trip at that time. And we spoke earlier about sort of the sense of freedom to travel places. That was a cultural moment where lots of young people did travel and, in a sense, came away with knowing different cultures and different peoples, sometimes making quite lifelong connections. And so it captures a particular moment in the history of the world when young people with not always a great deal of money felt free and able to travel to places without a threat of particular harm. And so it's a cultural vignette, put it that way.
Thank you, Professor. And so there are a number of interviews that you conducted. I believe it was over 40. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, 48 of people who had actually made the trip, and that was tracking them down was kind of interesting. I had to run ads in different places, so I ran some in the LA Times, the New York Times, major newspapers here in Canada, uh, also in Britain, and also some German newspapers and in Australia. So. And there was a lot of people, as I said, 48 anyway, that responded and had wonderful stories. Each individual story is almost worth a book. Some of these people, some of the things they did, far more daring than I did, uh, but wonderful. And without hesitation, all of the people that contacted me were very willing to talk about it, and not just about their experiences of the time. And that's one of the other things the book emphasizes, but how the trip actually changed people who did it. That you can't come away from that kind of experience, in a sense, unscathed in both a positive and negative sense. And so, sort of the lifelong changes that came out of that. In my case, I think that actually that trip, as I said, I did it before I ever went to university. That trip, I think, also had an impact on my academic trajectory as well.
Well, these travel experiences that you have are really, they last a lifetime, and what you can learn from them and then incorporate it not only into your day to day, but into gratitude for what you have and for the experiences that you've gotten an opportunity to participate in.
Yeah, one of the things as you get older, you reflect back on things. I view myself as having lived a very privileged life insofar as just because I grew up in a working class family, but that's not the whole of it. To grow up at the time I was growing up in the West, after the Second World War, and there was an expansion of welfare state programs. There was a sense of not being as uncertain about your future as lots of young people experience now. So I view myself as having been incredibly lucky. Any experience, of course, should change you again, whether it's good, bad, or not. I have a saying. I say, if you have an experience and it hasn't changed you, then you didn't experience it. Right? I mean, everything you go through, whether it's just growing up someplace, working at a job, traveling somewhere, getting married, getting divorced, having children, whatever, all of these things are experiences in your life. And what's the old saying? I think, one Greek philosopher said that something about the unexamined life is not worth living. Well, as you get older, you especially like to re-examine how your life actually was formed.
Absolutely. I'm in agreement there with you. Now, I know you're going to do some reading for us. Tell us what you'll be reading from.
Yeah, I've got a couple of poems actually, I think that I could read here. Maybe I think one of them that I think people might find really in this, when we talk about travel, I think the one of the people that a lot of travelers, people think about traveling is Bourdain. So I wrote about a poem trying to get inside the head, the heart, the life of Anthony Bourdain, who's, when you watch his shows, here's somebody who traveled and really tried to understand the people living there, to get inside that experience. And so his death, I think, shook a lot of us. So I wrote this poem about his life and maybe what he went through. It starts out with a quote from him. To sit alone or with a few friends, half drunk under a full moon, you just understand how lucky you are. It's a story you can't tell. It's a story you almost by definition can't share. I've learned in real time to look at those things and realize I just had a really good moment. That was from his final interview, actually. So I wrote this poem. Hanoi to Hong Kong, Barcelona to Berlin. The long road stretched forever, but not home. He told others tales, but not his own. No subterranean city depths ran so silent deep as the demon fears and loneliness that stalked his wake and sleep. No fine cuisine of lobster crepe or coq au vin or slow-baked sole could satiate or give escape or fill the gaping hole. No bourbon, weed, or wine could drown his silent fears, could scurry off the Paris night of pained and haunted tears.
Wow. It's powerful.
Yeah, as is the case sometimes I struggle to redo poems over and over, and sometimes they take years. This one, I think I wrote over a very few days. It just sometimes things come together, when you're creating something. It just felt right. Yeah.
Yeah. Congratulations. And thanks for
Well,
sharing that with us today.
thank you.
Do you have another you'd like to share with us?
Well, maybe as I'll read one here on my leaving as a professor. And of course, one of the things you can see behind me here, this is my office at home. I still have more books that I know what to do with, and they you know, I'm in danger of being inundated by them. But I wrote one book, one poem called "A Farewell to Books," as I was trying to get rid of the books in my office and what to do with them. So this one is somewhat in just talking about this delightful dilemma. A farewell to books. To keep or not to keep, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler to trundle these dog-eared tomes homeward, or to take up arms of books to abandon on yon hallway table there, to die a slow death, or, saving thus a caretaker's labor, lug them now to the bin, or, perchance, send to Big John's books, or, surely you jest, gift them to the library, that concentrated seat of study carols and coffee cups.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much. What comes to mind as you're reading that?
Well, as said, you end up collecting endless numbers of books, and there's some books still I will not get rid of. And it's not because I'm going to go back and read them again, but they have a kind of emotional sense to them. I remember, say, I used that book in a course when I was a student, or I used it as while I was teaching. And so books become really very personal. They have carry a lot of weight, and so every time I get rid of them, I used to say there was two things I would not get rid of, and that was music and books. Well, sadly, because of lack of space, I've actually had to start getting rid of both. But they will pull them out of my cold dead hand when they go.
Well, they've served their purpose. They've had a place in your life, and I'm sure they'll still live on.
Yeah.
Professor, thank you for being here today. If people want to reach out to you, what's the best way to do that, and how can people purchase your books?
Yes, again, any of the books actually that I've published are very much available on Amazon. The two latest poetry books also can be purchased through Friesen Books as well as Amazon. But a quick search of my bio will show up all the books, and you can get them for sure through Amazon. If not, contact me directly, and people can contact me either directly at my email address. I'm quite fine with that, or they can contact me on Facebook, and always happy to respond to anybody who wants to send me a message.
Okay, sorry about that. I was scrolling through your website. So it was through Amazon, through the books. So again, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. I learned a lot, and I wish you a joyous time on your excursions, and come back and tell us about them, please.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this, Jacalyn. I definitely will come back.
All right, thank you. Bye for now.
Bye now.
Well, that concludes our episode of The Wise Ones. Thank you so much for watching. If you're new to our network, we are streaming on many places, but I always ask people to please subscribe to our YouTube channels as opposed to watching on the other places, because we get real data and information about where people are watching from, how long they're watching. And we are the proud owner of the YouTube Silver Creator Award for passing 100,000 subscribers on our first channel, and we're working on our second channel. So please do subscribe there. Okay, if you'd like to get in touch with me, my information is in the details. You can contact me on either of my websites, usaglobaltv.com or drjacalyn.com, or you can email me at drjacalyn@usaglobaltv.com. I will be signing off now, as our next show is coming up. Red will not be doing Talking Heads today, as he has the day off. I'll be coming back with my show, which is What You Were Never Taught in School. So stay tuned for that. And again, please do subscribe to our channels. We'd love to have you join us. And we'll say goodbye now as we go over to our sponsors, including Tracy Cram-Perkins. USA Global TV and Radio proudly presents Tracy Cram-Perkins, a dementia caregiving survivor teaching how to balance care with peace of mind. #1 resource for dementia caregivers. It's the book Dementia Home Care: How to Prepare Before, During, and After. Over 17,000 copies sold of this must-have guide. And now a testimonial from Tracy Smith.
If I was to describe this book to someone who is going through a similar situation, I would underscore how important it is to have some sort of a tool or a guidebook to help you through certain stages. And there's so many, it's such an unknown topic to the average person. And to have this as a reference is essential. It's going to help you get through it personally, as well as help your loved one manage.
To learn more, go to TracyCramPerkins.com. Tracy Cram Perkins is an award-winning author. She's also the host of Dementia Home Care television show. Watch it here on USA Global TV and Radio.
Thank you, viewers and listeners of USA Global TV and Radio, for joining us today. We're honoured to have your time and attention as part of our global community. At USA Global TV and Radio, we believe in the power of authentic conversations, meaningful connections, and creating a world of possibilities together. Want to be part of something bigger? Join our team of elevated listeners at usaglobaltv.com, a space where your voice matters and your ability to listen transforms relationships. Stay connected with us across all our platforms for thought-provoking discussions, expert insights, and empowering stories. Subscribe to our channels at youtube.com/c/USA Global TV. Follow us on social media and explore the endless opportunities we're creating for growth, learning, and inspiration. Together, we're not just broadcasting, we're building bridges and changing lives one conversation at a time. For inquiries, contact us at info@usaglobaltv.com. Produced by Executive Producer and Director Dr. Jacalyn KERBECK. Voiceover by Mike Porter. Creative direction by Paul Garcia. All rights reserved. Visit usaglobaltv.com to view our full terms and conditions.